Hello everyone, welcome back. I want to do a review of these Fox Vietnam era uh, clones of jungle boots. Okay, so these aren't like the original company that made these, but they're basically a clone. So I want to talk about first. I want to talk about the boot design, and then I'm going to talk about the quality of this particular brand, which they call Fox, which is Chinese made. Okay, so naturally, there's the quality, as you would expect, is going to be a little bit less. We're going to go into to exactly where the quality is less. But first, let's talk about the design, because this is a really cool design. Okay, um, now I had done an initial review of these boots back in, I think, October when I first bought these. I didn't really get a chance to wear them. The reason is because I'm up here on the mountain, and by October it's already starting to get cold, and these things are basically summer boots. Okay, um, now these things are not designed to keep water out. In fact, they are specifically designed to allow water in. Okay, so they're canvas over here, and they even got these little breathing holes over here. So the purpose of these two holes over here, right, is so that when you step in water, and these things basically absorb water as you step, you're essentially pumping the water out. Okay, so these aren't an attempt to try and keep water out of the boot, but once the water gets in, they have a really good system of getting it out. Now, the reason why they did that is because they found that if you design a boot that is going to, let's say, be truly waterproof, okay, um, what's going to happen is in the summertime, you're going to get heat that builds up in there, and you're going to end up with a foot fungus. Okay, so any boot that is good enough to keep water out, uh, completely, like 100% of the time, is going to give you a foot fungus. Okay, so that they decided, right, back when they were trying to design a jungle boot, they decided that was not the approach. The approach that they say is, hey, let the water in, and we'll just come up with a design that can get the water out as quickly as possible. And basically, when the sun comes out, you can put these out and let them dry. Okay, so that was how they decided to deal with the water issue, and I think it's a pretty good idea. Okay, because I agree that in the summertime it's really hard to wear boots like these. Your feet get really, really hot, especially on those days when the temperature goes over 90 degrees. These are unbearable. Usually, for most of the summer, unless I'm doing some, like, working with dirt or something, or doing some type of landscaping work, I'm usually prancing around in these things over here. Okay, so now one of the things worth mentioning is that these boots are very light. Okay, so these boots, as far as like the weight on your feet, kind of feel like these. Okay, these two have more in common than these two. Okay, in fact, this boot is a lot closer to these things here than it is to this or this. Okay, so that's one of the things to be aware of, like as far as how this is going to feel on your feet. Now, as far as ankle support, okay, this is canvas. There is no ankle support. Okay, again, it feels more like this. So the purpose, I mean, the question becomes, why have laces that come, I don't know, whatever, 8 inches high? Why not just cut it off over there? Well, the problem is when you're walking around in mud, mud tends to, basically if you step into mud and get your entire foot into mud, as you try to pull your foot out, there's a suction that's created. And one of the things that I find with boots like these is once you get these into mud and you try to pull your foot out, what happens is your foot tends to come out of the boot. Okay, so that's the reason why the reason why I suspect they decided that they needed to lace these up so high, so that when you do step in mud and there's a suction that's created, you're able to pull your foot out of the mud without your foot coming out of the boot. Now, in addition to that, these boots have a great system for dealing with the mud. If you look over here on the bottom, these treads are very far apart, okay? So what happens with boots like these, right, where the treads are a lot closer together, is they tend to retain the mud. So when you come out of the mud and you're walking around, these things all of a sudden your feet feel like 3 times heavier, because basically you've got a layer of mud that's stuck to the bottom of this, and as you're walking around, you're walking around with about an inch of mud that's kind of like stuck to the bottom of your boot. Now that is also going to happen a little bit with this, but because the treads are a little bit wider, as you're walking around, it is more quickly going to fall off. And you kind of see this a little bit with like the treads in, let's say, Jeep tires, right? You know, mud and snow tires, the treads tend to be a little bit further apart to allow, so the mud doesn't stick to it so much, so that it's able to fall away more easily. Okay, so that was the design, probably the genius design that this boot comes up with over here. Now, in addition to that, what they did is there's actually a very thin metal plate that runs along the inside of the sole. Okay, and the idea was because in the Vietnam era, the North Vietnamese Army and the Viet Cong, they like to put these little punji sticks, traps, basically on the ground. So they basically sharpen sticks so that when you step on it, it would puncture through the bottom of the boot and basically impale your foot. And then what they would also do is they would dip these punji sticks in shit so that you would get an infection. So with this boot, what they decided to do was they put a plate, a thin metal plate that basically went on the inside of the sole, so that if you stepped on one of these wooden pokey sticks, it wouldn't penetrate the sole, or at least not as deep. I've seen some tests and it seems to work pretty good. Now, as far as this Chinese knockoff, how good, because I read in the, I haven't cut this thing open to inspect it, but I read in the description when I bought these that it did in fact have that plate. I'm guessing that they put something in there that's like aluminum thin. So on this cheap Chinese knockoff, like how much would I trust that the plate, the steel, or the metal that's in there would actually protect my foot if I were to step on something sharp? Not too much, okay? But because they figured, I guess, not too many. I mean, I suspect they figured not too many people were going to test that out by stepping on sharp spikes. But as far as being able to keep the mud off of the bottom, because they pretty much copied the design, that works pretty good. The other thing that is worth mentioning, because this boot is so light, I noticed that the way I move through the forest, the way I walk through the forest, has kind of changed a little bit, right? So when I have these type of boots here, I find myself kind of like stomping through the forest like Bigfoot. Boof, 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 boof. And then what happens is, like, I'm generally less sensitive to the ground. I'm stepping on all sorts of sticks and cracking them, and that's a big thing if you consider a jungle combat type of situation where you're trying to quietly move through the jungle. With these type of boots, okay, I can feel the ground better, okay? I'm more sensitive to the contours of the ground. If I'm gonna step on a stick or a rock, I generally have a better sense of what I'm stepping on, and that's because this is a lighter boot. In fact, the sole here, right, is actually thinner than this thing over here. This probably has a thicker, tougher sole than this boot over here, because with these, again, I'm a little bit less sensitive to the ground with these. In fact, if you on the ground here, I've got gravel, and a lot of times with the gravel, you got little, basically I can feel the gravel through the bottom of the boot. Okay, so it is not extremely comfortable to walk on gravel ground, stuff like this, right, for a very long period of time, because you can actually feel this stuff through the boot. Now, when I'm walking on this ground with these, I feel it even more, okay, because this is even thinner, but I feel it less if I have these on, and with these type of boots, I really don't feel the gravel at all, okay. Now, if a lot of times if I'm walking through the forest, and like I said, these things don't have any ankle support, okay, whereas these do, okay. So a lot of times what will happen is, let's say I'm walking through the forest and I step on a rock and my ankle starts turning. This has really good support and I'm able to kind of catch myself. This wouldn't do that, but with this, as soon as you step on the rock, you sense that, okay, you're stepping on something that you really don't want to be putting too much weight and pressure on. So you're not going to apply the same force on top of that rock or uneven ground or the hole in the ground as you will with this. Because with this, I generally don't feel the ground as much as with this. With this, I'm a lot more sensitive to the ground. Okay, so I think that's a important distinction, and especially if you think about a combat situation, again, where you're trying to quietly move through the woods. You don't want to be stepping on sticks that go crack, or maybe you're even feeling your way for booby traps. You can get a much better sense of what's on the ground with this versus this. Okay. So that's, again, when I did the initial review back in October, I hadn't developed that experience of wearing these and walking through the jungle. And now having done that, I mean, basically I've been doing some landscaping work for about a month. So I've gotten a good sense of how these feel through the forest, through the mud, through the dirt, and that kind of stuff. So an excellent boot. I love the treads. I love the lightness. This is a great summer boot. Okay, now, like I said, I bought these back in October. The reason why I didn't wear these in October is because it's cold, and because these don't keep the water out. If you step in water, even if it's rainwater, and it splashes up and gets this thing wet, your feet are gonna get really, really cold, right? You got these holes here that are really low to the bottom, so even if you step in the pool of water that's up to here, you're gonna get water inside the boot. So even in the fall, this is not the boot that you want to be using. Okay, so this is strictly a summer boot. Now, as a summer boot, very comfortable, very light. It definitely, it feels almost like I'm wearing these things as far as coolness. So there's definitely no heat that I feel building up in here. I mean, we haven't had a heat wave yet this summer, but we've had some pretty warm days, like above 80 degrees, and I didn't feel that my feet were getting hot at all in these, okay? So great walking through the mud, okay? When they got wet, they dried up pretty easy. Basically just leave them out in the sun, they'll dry up pretty easy. Again, one of the things I haven't really been able to test out is the metal plate that is supposedly inside of this. But overall, I love this design. It definitely accomplishes the thing that it serves the purpose that I needed it for, which was a light summer boot that would be good for walking through mud that wouldn't absorb mud on the bottom. So now let's talk about this specific boot by Fox. All right, here's their label right there. Fox, okay. So these were pretty cheap. I think they were $35. I think they were called, they did list these as blendished. So I think normally they're like $70. But I was able to get these off Amazon for $35. I think the reason why they were blemished is because maybe there were some marks on the sole over here, some mild imperfections. So I think that is the reason why they were a little bit down in price. But definitely cheap Chinese crap, in a sense that if you look at the leather over here, you can see how it's splitting. Okay, so it's only a matter of time before these two things separate. Okay, so yeah, definitely cheap Chinese crap. So even though this is a great design, right? See the air holes over here. Even though this is a great design, not very well made. Okay, so basically this is a 1 month boot, and you can see some of the fabric starting to come apart over here. Although I don't think that's not a big deal, but this is a big deal because that is going to separate, and that's just going to make the boot unusable. Okay, so I think this is an excellent design, great summer boot. However, crappy clone by this company called Fox. Okay, so there's a couple of other companies out there that sell these. I would probably recommend that you go one of the others. The other thing I want to mention is that this is very soft rubber. Okay, which is great for the forest, but because this is such soft rubber, I mean, this is not something that you want to wear, out on pavement or in parking lots. This is something strictly for soft ground, okay? Because this is going to wear out very quickly. I don't know if that's an issue particularly with Fox. I'm going to assume that this was part of the original design, since these boots were intended for the jungle. They probably decided that they didn't need, a very stiff sole. Okay, and especially since they had the metal plate on the inside, and also the softer rubber does act as a little bit of a shock absorber since there's just so little, So I'm thinking. I don't know for sure, but I'm thinking that the soft rubber was part of the original design. So, but I love this design. It's a great boot. I know that the military has a more modern version of this. I've looked at images of it. It's definitely heavier. I can see that it definitely has more ankle support, a thicker sole over here. It's starting to drift more in this direction over here. But for my purposes of needing a light boot for the summer, I mean, this is a great boot. So when this thing completely wears out over here and these become not usable, I'm going to probably order another pair of these, just under a different name brand. I think there's another company that sells this. And try that out and see how long that lasts. Okay, so basically I got 1 month out of this before this started developing over here, that separation. And now in that 1 month I was using these pretty hard in the mud on top of rocks, climbing rock piles. So again, being on top of rock piles, trying to balance yourself, I mean, that's very hard on the boot, pushing, trying to shift rocks over, that kind of stuff. So in the 1 month I've had these, I've been very hard on these. I mean, basically the same stuff that I do with these boots that I've had for several months already. I mean, obviously these are Timberland Pros. These hold up a lot better, but they're also very heavy and horrible for for the summer as far as hot summer days. One of the things I hate about these is these little hooks that they put here instead of holes. I absolutely hate that because when I try to tie these, I keep missing these. So I don't know why they use these hooks. They're terrible. I much prefer holes like these things have over here, right? I like holes. I don't like hooks. So anyway, I thought I would share that experience with you guys. Let me see on this other one. This one over here clearly starting to separate. I do kind of wonder if that's maybe specific to this one boot. So I'm looking at the other one here. I don't see that much separation, although I do see on this side over here an area where it might potentially start separating over there. There's a little bit more of a gap here than in other places. So I don't know. But definitely separation on the other one. Okay, so again, this is based on, this is a clone of a boot that was developed in the Vietnam era. I call it the Vietnam jungle boot. Excellent design, great for for dealing with mud. Great for, you know, for dealing with water in a hot environment where you don't have to worry about your feet freezing, where you're okay with your feet being wet and then drying out. You know, and also allows you to be very sensitive to the ground as you walk, and then also supposedly has that steel shank in there to protect you against punji sticks. So thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you all soon.